In a world that constantly pulls at your emotions, manipulates your attention, and weaponizes your feelings against you, emotional detachment isn't coldness, it's survival. It's not about being numb or indifferent. It's about refusing to let someone else's chaos dictate your inner peace. Emotional detachment is the difference between reacting like a slave to every trigger and responding like a master, grounded, clear, untouchable. You don't detach because you don't care. You detach because you finally realized that caring too much about people who don't respect your presence, your time, or your energy is self-betrayal. When your emotional state is tied to someone else's validation, availability, or approval, you've already given away control of your life. Detachment is reclaiming that control. It's the quiet decision to stop bleeding for what no longer feeds you. In the silence, in the distance, in the refusal to engage with drama, something stronger begins to grow. Clarity. You begin to see who they really are. You begin to feel who you really are, without the noise, the fantasy, or the false hope. And once you feel that power, once you taste the calm that comes from no longer needing anyone to act a certain way for you to be at peace, you understand that detachment isn't the end of love or connection, it's the beginning of freedom. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the emotional, psychological, and nervous system level path to detachment, not as an escape, but as a weapon of sovereignty. Because when you master emotional detachment, nothing and no one can use your own heart against you again. Emotional attachment doesn't begin with the other person. It begins with the illusion they awaken in you. It's the story your mind tells about who they are, what they represent, and how they'll finally give you the safety, love, or significance you've been searching for. Most attachments aren't formed through logic. They're born in moments of vulnerability, when someone reflects back something familiar, comforting, or validating. Your nervous system latches on before your mind catches up, and suddenly, their presence feels like oxygen. This is how dependency starts, not because they're exceptional, but because you linked your emotional stability to their behavior. They become the mirror through which you see yourself, and when that mirror smiles back, you feel worthy. When it turns cold, you feel abandoned. Emotional attachment thrives on unpredictability. The more inconsistent someone is, the deeper your system clings to the moments they show you warmth, creating a psychological loop of hope, withdrawal, and obsession. And because you've now confused attachment with meaning, your entire sense of value can begin to orbit around their mood, attention, or affection. This is why emotional attachment is so dangerous. It disguises itself as love while slowly eroding your power. You don't just miss them, you miss how you felt when they made you feel needed. You don't just want them back, you want the parts of yourself that only felt alive in their presence. Until you see this clearly, you remain enslaved to the emotional highs and lows they create. True detachment begins by understanding that the bond isn't just between you and them, it's between you and the story you've been feeding. And once you break that story, they lose their power. Staying emotionally tied to the wrong person doesn't just delay your healing, it quietly destroys your sense of self. Every time you remain connected to someone who disrespects your value, who plays with your emotions, or who only shows up when it benefits them, you're teaching your nervous system to accept instability as normal. It erodes your internal compass. You begin to doubt your instincts, suppress your needs, and tolerate behavior that your past self would have walked away from without hesitation. Emotional ties to the wrong person make you compromise in silence,
bending yourself into shapes to avoid conflict, clinging to breadcrumbs of affection, and rewriting red flags into romantic signs of potential. You don't realize it at first, but you become addicted, not to them, but to the cycle they've created. The pain becomes familiar, and in that familiarity, you begin to equate survival with love. That's how toxic dynamics root themselves, not through constant suffering, but through intermittent rewards that keep you hooked at just enough to stay. And as you stay, you start abandoning your future for a past that never truly existed the way you remember it. Your goals, your standards, your emotional clarity, they all get pushed aside in favor of managing the emotional chaos they bring. You begin to think peace is boring and that love must be intense, unstable, dramatic. But that's the trap. The longer you stay tied to the wrong person, the more distant you become from the version of yourself that was once clear, decisive, and free. And until you recognize the silent cost, the wasted time, the suppressed truth, the slow death of self-respect, you will keep defending a connection that's draining you. Detachment is not abandonment. It is the sacred act of choosing your sanity over your suffering.
The moment emotional detachment becomes possible is the moment you accept the deepest Stoic truth. You do not control them, you only control yourself. This realization isn't comfortable at first because it shatters the illusion that your effort, your love, your patience, or your sacrifice can make someone show up the way you need. Most people stay emotionally stuck not because they're weak, but because they still believe that if they just say the right thing, prove their loyalty, or hold on long enough, the other person will finally change. That belief is the chain. It keeps you checking your phone, replaying every conversation, walking on eggshells, trying not to scare them off, all in an attempt to manage an outcome that was never in your hands. The Stoic doesn't seek to control others, they seek to master their response. This means accepting that people will ghost you, lie to you, betray you, or pull away without closure, and still you will not chase, collapse, or retaliate. Not because you don't feel, but because you've disciplined your mind to put inner peace above emotional chaos. You detach by understanding that someone else's inability to meet you with clarity, consistency, or care is a reflection of them, not a verdict on your worth. And once you stop needing people to behave differently in order for you to be okay, you become untouchable. That's what Stoic detachment really is. Not a lack of emotion, but the refusal to let someone else's instability provoke your destruction. The only thing within your power is how you interpret, respond, and move. Everything else is noise. Emotional detachment isn't just a mindset, it's a rewiring of the nervous system that has been conditioned to crave chaos, chase validation, and associate emotional pain with love. When someone trains your system to expect unpredictable highs and lows, your body begins to confuse adrenaline with connection and silence with abandonment. You feel withdrawal the same way an addict feels it, because your brain has built neural pathways around their attention, anticipating their messages, fearing their absence, and tying your sense of safety to their behavior. This loop becomes involuntary. You're not just overthinking, you're chemically addicted to the emotional cycle they've created. Breaking this pattern requires more than logic. It requires discomfort. It requires sitting with the urge to reach out and doing nothing. It means facing the ache in your chest without trying to numb it with fantasy, closure-seeking, or emotional bargaining. This is how your nervous system learns, through exposure to the very emptiness you fear, until your body stops reacting to their absence like it's a threat. You breathe through the spike in anxiety, and over time, the spikes dull. You begin to reclaim your baseline.
This is the grind most people avoid, the internal resistance that comes with rewiring your nervous system to no longer expect validation from someone who made inconsistency feel like love. But this is the gateway to power. You are training yourself to sit still in the storm without reaching for the person who caused it. You're teaching your body that peace doesn't come from them, it comes from you. And once your nervous system stops flinching every time their name appears or disappears, you know you're free. That's the quiet revolution of emotional detachment. It doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it simply stops needing. Emotional detachment becomes real the moment you stop feeding the addiction. And that addiction is not just to a person, but to the validation they once gave, the hope you still cling to, and the fantasy your mind created to fill in all their missing pieces. Most people aren't attached to who the other person actually is. They're attached to who they wanted them to be, to the dream version that occasionally showed up during the highs, but was never truly consistent, stable, or real. Every time you replay old messages, stalk their socials, wait for their texts, or mentally re-edit the past to justify their behavior, you're giving energy to a phantom. That's how the addiction stays alive. Not because they're present, but because your attention keeps them emotionally alive in your nervous system. The fantasy feeds on your silence, the hope feeds on your waiting, and the validation becomes a drug you'll do anything to feel again, even if it costs your dignity. But detachment is a war of attention, and the only way to win is to starve the cycle. That means cutting off not just contact, but the internal conversations that keep them sacred in your mind. You stop explaining yourself to them in your head. You stop imagining the day they'll realize your worth. You stop making their absence mean that something is wrong with you. Instead, you return your attention to the present moment, to your breath, to your goals, to your own reflection. And you face the truth that if someone needs to lose you to value you, they were never truly capable of seeing you to begin with. Starving the addiction means accepting that no fantasy is worth your emotional imprisonment, and no temporary validation is worth long-term self-abandonment. This is how you break the spell. This is how you win. Emotional detachment doesn't leave a void. It creates space, and what you fill that space with determines whether you relapse into emotional chaos or rise into mental clarity and self-discipline. The mistake most people make after cutting someone off is leaving their mind idle, letting their thoughts spiral into what-ifs, whys, and when will they return fantasies. But the Stoic understands that nature hates a vacuum. If you don't consciously replace the emotional noise with focused intention, your past will creep back in, dressed as nostalgia. Mental clarity isn't found in overthinking. It's forged in structure. You start by reclaiming your mornings, setting your routines, writing your truth without censorship, training your body to hold discipline, and training your mind to stop interpreting silence as rejection. You remove the distractions that fed your dependency, unfollowing, muting, deleting, detaching, and you redirect that energy into building the version of yourself that no longer needs to beg for emotional scraps. Clarity comes when your actions align with your values. Self-discipline is choosing to keep walking forward even when the emotional pull tries to drag you back into patterns that nearly destroyed you. You stop needing closure from them because you've given yourself an answer louder than words, your absence. You stop needing revenge because your growth becomes the consequence. You stop needing them to see your worth because you're now too focused on fulfilling your own potential. Detachment is not just what you walk away from, it's what you walk into. A life that doesn't revolve around mood swings, mixed signals, or empty promises. A life where your peace isn't earned, it's protected. And the longer you remain committed to that path, the less their name stirs anything in you but wisdom.
True emotional detachment isn't the absence of feeling, It's the mastery of feeling without being enslaved by it. Letting go does not mean becoming cold, bitter, or indifferent. Those are just masks for unresolved pain and fear. The Stoic warrior understands that detachment is a form of profound compassion, not for them, but for yourself. You release the need to control outcomes, to rewrite history, or to punish those who hurt you, because you know that holding on only prolongs your suffering. Compassion here is the recognition that everyone is flawed, driven by their own fears, insecurities, and wounds, just like you once were. Yet compassion doesn't mean sacrifice your peace or lower your standards. It means acknowledging the reality without emotional entanglement, seeing them as they are without hoping for what they could never be. You detach by choosing to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom from the chains of resentment. This act of releasing bitterness isn't weakness, it's strength disguised as grace. When you let go with compassion, you disarm your own triggers, preventing old wounds from reopening and new ones from forming. You become a fortress of calm amid emotional storms, someone who can observe pain without drowning in it. This balance between feeling and detachment, love and boundaries, is what separates the weak from the warriors. Because true detachment honors your heart while protecting it, turning emotional surrender into a victory of the soul. The final stage of emotional detachment is not merely survival, it is transcendence. It is becoming untouchable by the emotional chaos that once held you hostage, walking through life with a quiet power that no one's actions can shake. This level of freedom comes when you stop measuring your worth by another's presence or absence, and instead root your identity in your own unshakable values, discipline, and clarity. You realize that peace is not something to be earned or negotiated. It is your birthright, your default state beneath the noise of human drama. To become untouchable means you no longer invest your energy in trying to fix others or rewrite painful histories. You invest it instead in creating a life so full, so aligned with your purpose, that no empty promises or emotional withdrawals can pull you back into old patterns. This detachment radiates outward. It influences how you carry yourself, how you speak, and how you hold space for others without losing yourself. You become a beacon of calm in a stormy world, a person whose presence commands respect, not through demand, but through quiet strength. And in this state, you finally understand that emotional detachment is not a barrier to connection, but the foundation of authentic relationships. Because only when you no longer need someone can you truly choose them. Living free beyond emotional dependency means embracing the uncertainty of life without fear, walking forward without hesitation, and facing whatever comes with a steady heart. This is the Stoic warrior's promise, to never be undone by another's absence, to reclaim your power in every moment, and to live a life governed not by emotion, but by mastery. You've just walked through the deepest layers of emotional detachment, the silent war inside the mind, the nervous system rewiring, the brutal truth of letting go without losing yourself. This isn't a quick fix or some feel-good mantra. It's the path of the modern Stoic warrior, grounded in reality, fueled by discipline, and driven by the unyielding pursuit of peace. Now, the real work begins, because knowledge alone changes nothing. It's the daily choices, the uncomfortable moments you sit through without giving in, the silent battles won in your own mind that carve your freedom. If you found this truth valuable, if it struck a chord deep inside, don't just watch, engage. Comment below with your thoughts, share your own struggles or victories with detachment,
And let's build a community of warriors committed to mastering themselves. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a lesson that cuts through the noise and gets to the core of power, growth, and control. Remember, your peace is non-negotiable. Guard it fiercely. Live with purpose, and above all, stay the course. The battlefield of emotion is where warriors are forged. This is your moment. Own it.